School for the Deaf budget, as well as the Kansas School for the Blind budget. At that time, once we've finished that work, then we will begin our hearing on Senate Bill 496. Now, I do have 11 people that signed up to provide oral testimony. We also have quite a few people that have provided written testimony. It's my understanding that we have some people here that didn't provide testimony that want to speak. Unfortunately, well, here's what we will do. We're going to see how long it takes us to work through the budget and taking action on those three budgets. We will let the proponents, the neutral, and the opponents that have submitted testimony and signed up to speak, we will let them speak. I think at the most, they're going to have 2 to 3 minutes to talk. I'm going to ask folks, so whoever isn't the first person, so those that follow, I'm going to use a rule that I used in my classroom where I need you to share something new that we haven't already heard from the person or the people that spoke before you. But those that signed up will have an opportunity. We will time you. It's only going to be about 2 or 3 minutes, like I said, but if we have extra time at the end, and there are a few people that want to speak and share something that we have not heard as a committee yet, then we will give that opportunity. We are limited on time simply because we're supposed to be up on the Senate floor when our committee time ends. I also want to make you aware that anyone can submit emails. And we received many, many emails from folks, not actually testimony, but emails. So everyone is always welcome to send emails, not only to our committee members, but to all legislators. At this time, let's begin our work with regard to the budgets. And the first question I want to make sure that we could clarify is, JG, you did provide us this printout. Was it Gabriella? Sorry, Gabriella, you provided us this printout, and that was the ESSER funding that each school district received. So one of the questions that did come up yesterday after some committee members had a little bit of time to look at this, they were just simply dividing the adjusted enrollment by the total ESSER allocation that actually occurred, dividing that, number of students by the ESSER funds that were received. Can you tell us, were ESSER funds given a different weighting based on student population? Because it seemed that a few districts were getting less than $1,000 per student, less than $1,000, and others, it might have been like $10,000 to $12,000 per student. So could you share that? Because I know that was a concern.
Certainly. So the formula for all ESSER was done by the Title I formula.
Okay.
So it would not just be the total enrollment, but it would be using our Title I formula. The districts highlighted in pink on your sheets did receive true-up funding. Some school districts did not receive an equalized base. So for ESSER 2, I believe it was $300 per student. And for ESSER 3, it was closer to $600. So those districts were given a little bit more money to help equalize if they didn't qualify under their Title I formula for those amounts.
Okay. And that also means, so the total adjusted enrollment wasn't the adjustments for Title I, they were other adjustments.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful to know. Thank you very much for that. So committee, now let's turn to, first of all, we have our Kansas State Department of Education budget before us. And there are actually several choices in this process. One is that we can make a recommendation for change from what has been submitted to us. We know already that there are differences between what the agency has requested and what the governor has recommended. And so we do need to make a decision in motion form as to whether the recommendation is to go with what the agency had requested, what the governor had budgeted, or the governor's recommendation, or if we as a committee are wanting to make a change different from those two requests to send on to our Ways and Means Committee. So at this point, I will open it up for discussion, or if someone is wanting to make a motion. Senator Petty.
Madam Chair, when you talk about the Kansas State Department of Education, there, as I look at it, there was little difference between what the governor recommended and what the agency requested for enhancements, except if you look at special ed, to bring it to 92%. And otherwise, I mean, those other categories are minimal for sure. But I mean, I'm just voicing that. And they did say that they accepted the governor's recommendation as well.
They accepted, but they still made the ask.
That always happens.
So still not seeing a motion. Senator Petty.
I will make a motion for years 22 and 23 that we accept the governor's recommendation for the State Department of Education.
Okay. Do I have a second? I have a second from Senator Sykes. I think that we know that there was a recommendation with regard to layering of capers, but we already know from our hearing that that has been addressed in Ways and Means. So though that is in this packet was prepared long before that had occurred. So any discussion on the recommendation and the second? Senator Erickson and then Senator Petty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, my question would be on the special ed funding, and I apologize for not asking this sooner. As we increase the total amount, that affects the percent that we see reflected in the numbers. Is that correct? Am I understanding that correctly? So going by a percent or trying to shoot for 92% isn't exactly apples to apples, because as we increase the funding year over year, that percent is going to not be reflected in the amount of total dollars. Am I understanding that correctly?
So I've got both of my legislative researchers shaking their heads, but I need one of you to speak for us.
Yes, Madam Chairman. The increase in education, if that increase for the cost of special education is going up faster than the amount of money that is spent or appropriated for special education, if those two aren't congruent or at the same rate, then as you spend more money on special ed, if that money for appropriated money, it would not keep up. So it would continue to decrease. So as costs for special ed go up, the excess costs would be increasing as well. So now that I made that muddy, let me say it a different way. If the costs of money that is the local education agencies are spending goes up faster than what is appropriated, there's a difference. Statutorily, we're supposed to have the goal of 92% of excess costs covered. There is language that says that it will be prorated. So as that amount increases in actual expenditures for special ed and the appropriation doesn't go up as much, then that will be decreasing each year.
Senator Erickson, did you have a follow-up?
Not on that. Thank you very much. That was helpful. The only other question I have is how much is the increase? Is that an enhancement? I'm looking to find it due to the school finance formula increases that we approved. So what is that amount?
Excuse me, are you asking for how much salaries are going up or how much they are requesting for special ed?
No, I'm sorry, I'm changing course on you, JG, a little bit. No, the Montoy decision, or Gannon, sorry, how much is our obligation per the Supreme Court for fiscal year 2023, is what I'm asking. How much are we supposed to add in fiscal year 2023 because of the decision, court decision?
Go ahead, JJ.
That information is based on the base state aid that's going up, and I'm not sure that we have a calculation of what that base state aid is versus the weightings that have gone up. But we can get that for you shortly.
Thank you. So, Madam Chair, basically, my recommendation is for the budget as required by the Supreme Court. That is what I would be for recommending.
Well, I think with regard to, are you speaking with regard to that ask by the agency for additional money for? The request of the agency for additional money for, I'm looking for it. For that special fund? Are you, that you are not wanting that in there, or you are simply voicing that you would not be in support of the governor's recommendation?
Correct. I'm not in support of the governor's recommendation other than what we have been told we need to provide via the Supreme Court case. I do not support the increase for the delayed payments or the other enhancements, Madam Chair.
Is that a substitute motion, or you are just voicing that?
I'm voicing that and open to discussion.
Okay. Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question for the Vice Chair, I think. So the dyslexia coordinator, that change of funds from the Children's Cabinet for mental health, all of those you're wishing not to fund?
Correct.
Senator Petty.
I just wanted to mention that when I made that motion, I neglected to mention the request for a proviso for that $14,000 to be distributed to all the school districts. Otherwise, that fund cannot be dissolved. If you remember that discussion I brought forward.
Well, we know that those funds are sitting there. This is to be distributed. Those funds were donated during income tax. The agency simply said it would distribute it throughout the districts. It would certainly be the purview of this committee to, if they had a recommendation for how those funds might otherwise be distributed. So you're amending your motion. I assume we're amending the second on that to include the $14,227 distributed to the school districts.
To be distributed to all school districts.
Okay. I will ask of legislative research, did we receive a map yet on the MHIT pilot programs and the distribution of that?
We have not, but we can follow up with the agency on that.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Yes, Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 873, under that, eliminate the delayed school payment. So the way I understand that, that's an additional expenditure of $199.6 million. It's not just changing the date of payment. It would be an additional almost $200 million.
That is correct. Okay, I'm seeing no further questions. I'm sorry. Yes, JG.
It would be a change of date. It would move it from one fiscal year to the other. So there would be an additional almost $200 million expenditures in one fiscal year. and then it would be fully funding those going forward. So it is a change of date, and because of that change of date, there is a $200 million increase.
But it simply means they won't be making that payment the next month.
Correct.
Yeah. So now, are there any additional questions or comments? Senator Sykes.
JG, just a clarification. So this is money that we have appropriated, we have just not paid it. It's an accounting book, so our school districts are showing this as received, and then we're following up, paying it late. But this would get us current with our obligations.
Madam Chair, the current it was in the early 2000s, there was a shortfall of money, and they statutorily moved the payment from June to July. Statutorily, they said that these school districts had to count that money as if it were received in June, even though it was received in July. So it's caused some auditing issues. But this then would correct that error that's gone on since those are early 2000s.
Okay, not seeing any further questions. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Nay? Okay, I only heard 2 votes. So Senator Gossage?
Could you clarify what a yay note and a no note means? We've had
Yes.
several motions going around. That would be appreciated.
Yes, there's only one motion, and that is to pass out the Kansas State Department of Education budget for the 2 years based on the governor's recommendation. And that did include the $14,000 plus that would be distributed. That was an agency ask. So it's the budget, or the governor's recommendation, plus the ask for the $14,227 to be distributed amongst our nearly 300 school districts, yes. JG?
And you had mentioned this earlier, but I wasn't 100% sure that it was included. Since the Senate Ways and Means has a bill that's passing out the CAPERS layering payments, and the governor has it in this budget, the Senate Ways and Means has a direct transfer. I just want to make sure how we're handling that.
And I believe that would be something that would be included in the message from the committee. So an aye vote or a yes vote is in support of the motion of the governor's recommendation. A no vote would indicate that there is not support of the governor's recommendation. So I will tell you that the chair is uncertain because I only heard 2 aye votes. So at this point in time, I will ask for division. So I would like you to raise your hand if you are an aye vote in support of the motion of the governor's recommendation. So all those in favor say, raise your hand. So I see 4. Those opposed? 3. So that motion does pass. The question is anyone wanting their vote recorded? Okay, so I have Senator Straub, and I also have Senator Erickson that would like that vote recorded. Next up, we have the Kansas School for the Deaf. And so part of, yes?
I just wanted to ask, I mean, JG brought up the point about the CAPERS. And so do we want to, as part of this, say that we're recommending the agreeing with the Ways and Means Committee as it passed out the CAPERS funding?
I was thinking more in terms of exactly what I said. We are not including that funding because it's already been addressed in Ways and Means.
Okay.
So the understanding, so that would be a statement that the committee understands that that's already been addressed by the Committee of Ways and Means.
So our vote included that we're not including, that the CAPERS funding has already been taken care of elsewhere.
Right. So now we are back on the Kansas State School for the Deaf. Are there questions or comments with regard to the agency request versus the governor's recommendation? Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question here, because I'm not sure that I got the exact numbers yesterday, but because the School for the Deaf and the School for the Blind don't qualify to apply for those extra COVID funds, I just really would like to know how many extra COVID funds were sent to those schools. I imagine that they had even more obstacles to overcome in dealing with that and all of the regulations issued by the governor and KDHE. So I just want to make sure that we're not unfairly treating our truly disabled.
Okay, so JG has already indicated that legislative research is ready to respond.
Certainly. So Senator Straub is correct. They do not qualify for the Title I formula in the same manner as other school districts. They did receive coronavirus relief funding early on in the pandemic from the Office of the Governor. In fiscal year 2020, the Kansas State School for the Deaf received a little over $19,000 in CRF. And for fiscal year 21, they received a little over $440,000 in CRF. The School for the Blind in fiscal year 2020 received just over $5,000 in CRF. And in fiscal year 2021, a little over $457,000 in CRF. In addition, the Kansas Department of Education and the State Board of Education set aside a portion of ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 discretionary dollars for both schools. $150,000 was set aside in ESSER 2 and $400,000 in ESSER 3. The School for the Deaf received $100,000 in ESSER 2 funds and $200,000 in ESSER 3. And the School for the Blind received $50,000 in ESSER 2 and $200,000 in ESSER 3.
Did you have a follow-up question for that, Senator Straub?
No, thank you. That actually answers my question. But it does beg the question of when the pandemic first started, and I would think that needs would have been greatest, they were not given very much money, and I imagine that the 400 and some thousand given to both in 2021 was kind of a catch-up. So it's, I don't know, it's frustrating to try to make sense of all these numbers of where was this money spent? What was it used for? I am pleased to hear that they were sent other funds since they didn't qualify to apply for those others, but I'm just confused as to how those funds are actually being utilized now.
I don't believe that's information that we're going to have today for our decision. I will tell you that committee that I am concerned that the governor's recommendation does not include the funding for the LAP Phase 3 implementation or the LAP Phase 4 implementation. That was an ask that we did receive from the agency with regard to the Kansas School for the Deaf. If we are going to continue to address the issue where our children that are identified as deaf or hard of hearing, and we do mandate, Kansas Department of Health is required to perform that hearing test on all newborns. That is done on all newborns. And yet we know that there is a significant lag in language development historically in our state with regard to our children that are identified as deaf and hard of hearing. And so for us not to continue Phase 3 and Phase 4, which was legislated, so for the governor to say that she would not fund those next steps, I think that that's very concerning because we know that that is a population throughout the state. And so for us to not move forward on that, I think is very detrimental to what we're trying to do to close the gap as far as language acquisition, as well as academic performance as the children are either in our Kansas School for the Deaf or receiving those services in our other schools throughout the state. Yes, Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my apologies, I was late yesterday, so I missed part of this. And if I'm recalling from last year when the budget and this lab, I mean, I think we need to make sure we're receiving these services. But can I get an update of what Health and Environment and Department of Education, because I thought they were supposed to all three be working together on some kind of proposal to come together with funding sources. And my apologies if that was addressed yesterday, because I was late.
I would say that you are exactly correct. I think you got in here just at the tail end when it was actually answered by the superintendent that, yes, the Department of Health, the Department of Education are to be working simultaneously on that language assessment. And yet, what appears before us is that enhancement, LAP Phase 3, LAP Phase 4, is here in the budget for the Kansas School for the Deaf, and it's my understanding that it does not appear in the other two budgets. We know it's not in Kansas Department of Education. We do not have access to the Department of Health, but it's my understanding that it's not included in that either. So I think if one of the reasons that JG is here with us is if we have recommendations to make above or beyond or different from what is in the budget recommendation that we have before us, he can add that language. We did it last year as well. Add that language so that it goes on to Ways and Means. And so I certainly would welcome the notion that funding come from the Department of Education as well as the Department of Health and some from the School for the Deaf to cover LAP Phase 3 and Phase 4. But that would be the will of the committee. Do I have a motion from Senator Petty, or is that a question?
So I think in some ways we might not have all of the information. I know that this discussion has gone on since that legislation was passed, which talks about the state, the School for the Deaf doing the assessments, but not the having the funding. They're supposed to be working with the Kansas Department of Health and Environment and the state board. And that the Kansas Department of Health and Environment is birth to 3, and the local districts are 3 through 8. So I'm a little concerned about, because I think one of the issues that has continued to be out there is concerning the fee structure so that local school districts can pay for the assessments. That seems to be an ongoing discussion that, of course, we're not involved in at all. So I would have difficulty wanting to put the funding in there as instead of maybe making a recommendation that as part of the approval of when we pass this School for the Deaf budget on that that there be a further research or before the final budget is approved by Ways and Means, that the issue concerning hearing assessments be resolved, funding for hearing assessments. I haven't made a motion.
Sure. So the recommendation, my understanding is that before finalization of the budget in Senate Ways and Means, the committee would like Senate Ways and Means to review funding sources for the language assessment program.
Correct. Maybe I should make that motion a different way, though. I move to approve the budget for the School for the Deaf or the governor's recommendation for the school for the deaf, with the addition that, before the final, that Ways and Means look at the assessment fee funding stream necessary to be, or look at the assessment fee, the testing assessment fees in their final decision.
The governor's recommendation is not to include the agency's enhancement request for the funding. So if we were to approve the governor's recommendation, that prohibits funding for Phase 3 and Phase 4. So did you want to revise that and have it be the recommendation of 7 and 8? Or excuse me, the recommendation with the exception of not funding?
So, Madam Chair, on Ways and Means, as we've looked at other budgets, whether it's come from a subcommittee or whether it's come from a committee like Education, usually it's been that they did recommend the governor's budget with an addition.
Okay, all right. So we have a motion and we have a second. Is there any additional discussion? Senator Dietrich?
I just need to more clarification on what we're voting on.
Okay.
Governor's budget plus a potential enhancement if Ways and Means
Can sort through
through it. Is that what we're voting on?
the funding resources. Would you say that's a fair depiction of your motion? Yes, it is. Senator Sykes.
And thank you, just a comment. And I know JG was talking about the 22, because as I look back, so the funding that we did for that Phase 3 or the 22 budget, part of that came from KDHE and ks.gov. So I think Senator Petty's motion that Ways and Means look at those funding sources
For 2023?
for 2023.
Okay. So can we make sure that we've got that for the 2023? Okay. Any other questions? Yes, Senator Gossage.
So then is there are we changing her motion that it would be looking at all resources or just the fees? From what was just said by Senator Sykes.
We're looking at the 2023. 2023.
Right, so the 2023 budget, then, we are asking them to look at the sources, all sources, because I think the initial motion was just to look at the fees, the school district fees. I'm just asking if that motion could be amended to say, look at all.
Gabriella, I thought we had looking at all funding sources, so it wouldn't just be on the school district fees.
The original motion I have is to look at alternative or other funding sources, so that could include a fee for service or other funding.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes with that amendment on there. Thank you. So now we are on with the Kansas School for the Blind. Committee, I will tell you that after our hearing yesterday, it was disconcerting, again, that we have multi-floors at the School for the Deaf. We have children that are blind that are also wheelchair-bound, and that those kids are having to be carried either in their wheelchair or individually to get to the different floor. I think that legislative research did look into that. From an ADA standpoint, it's mandated if it's at least 3 floors, not mandated if it's fewer. But again, my concern is how could we possibly have a building for children with an identified handicap where they are having to be carried either in their wheelchair or individually because there's no elevator. I know that the request was for the funding to be for 2023. I would ask that we look at changing that so that the funding would be for fiscal year 2022, so that I do not want them to wait for a Spark application. I want them to begin that process now because I think it's just inappropriate. Also, with regard to knowing that they already are serving roughly 800 kids in 120 different school districts in 80 different counties, their concern is that they have at least another 700 or 800 children that have not been identified. We have reached out with the ophthalmologists and optometrist organizations, so we will be seeing a bill that will address that so that we have legislation before the end of this legislative session so that we are making sure that we are identifying children that are blind or have low vision. So that's not a direct outcome of the budget, but we do, JG has already indicated there are funds available to begin that process for that elevator this fiscal year without the delay. Committee, are there any other questions or comments or concerns about the budget for the School for the Blind? Senator Petty.
I guess I just want clarification. I thought I understood that the elevator issue dealt with going to the pool. So not going to the classes or not going to to their sleeping quarters, it dealt with going to the pool. I know it doesn't necessarily totally lessen it, but this is an extra activity. It's not it's not everyday activity.
Well, I don't know that we know for sure that it's not everyday activity. Physical education, swimming, every school district does have swimming pools, does have swimming as a part of physical education. Again, these children reside there. I think it's inappropriate for them to be carried after they've changed into their swimsuits back and forth to and from the pool area. So while it's not getting to the classroom, it's the facility that we support through funding, and it seems that it should be brought up to an appropriate expectation. Do I have a motion on this budget? Senator Petty.
I will make a motion that we approve the governor's recommendations for the budget for the School for the Blind for 2022, and with the enhancement of the funding for the elevator and the budget for 2023.
Okay. Do I have a second? Yes, second from Senator O'Shea. Is there any other discussion or questions on this particular budget? Senator Gossage.
Just a clarification, on page 971, it says they request the $283,000 for the elevator upgrades. So evidently, there's already an elevator. This is just to upgrade the elevator, correct?
That it works because it's not working.
Okay, just want to make sure that's to which you were referring. Thank you.
It is. Senator Sykes.
Just a question, and as I know, Senator Erickson and I will be looking at this. Do we want any provision in case they do receive funds that they possibly could get before through the Spark process? It's just a question. I really, doesn't matter either way. I'm just saying, should we put something in the language?
We could. Part of what I thought we heard during the hearing is that process is perhaps going to take several months before a decision was made, whereas I think if we move forward on this, they can move forward on the upgrades. Okay. We do know that they are using funds that they raised from their walk and marathon to upgrade another portion of the facility. So perhaps if, though today's the deadline, I'm not anticipating that that's going to get in there. So, Yeah. Make a special exception. I don't think we can do that in this committee. So all those in favor for the budget for the school for the blind, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Yes, JG.
I'm sorry. It's more of a technical, just to make sure that it was okay for the department, or for the Board of Education, the state board. There was a governor's recommendation for 24 that just funded the statutory increase for the Gannon case that's supposed to go up. And we were assuming that the motion included the 24 amount as well.
We're obligated for that.
Just want to make sure. Thank you.
Yes. We are now moving on to hearing on Senate Bill 496. We are limited in time. I'm going to have us stay 10 additional minutes so that we can hear from everyone, and so that everyone will have 2.5 minutes to speak, at least those that are signed up for oral testimony. I'm going to ask that one of my committee members please contact Corey to let him know that we will be running 10 minutes late. Okay? So at this point in time, we will start with an explanation of Senate Bill 496 from our reviser.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, committee. Senate Bill 496 would establish the Parents' Bill of Rights. Subsection B provides a purpose statement on the role of education in a child's development and the role of parents in a child's education. Subsection C generally provides that every parent has a right to direct the upbringing, education, care, and mental health of the parent's child. Additionally, it states that the following rights are reserved to each parent of a child in this state, and you can find these beginning on page 1 of the bill, starting in line 18. The parent has the right to direct the child's education and care, direct the child's upbringing and moral or religious training, request, access, and inspect all records maintained by a school relating to the child, be informed of and inspect the curriculum, instructional materials, and other materials made available to or taught to the child at school, attend public meetings of the local school board and communicate with school officials, make healthcare and medical decisions for the child, including decisions regarding vaccinations, expect that the child and the child's teacher shall not be compelled to adhere to any idea that violates the Civil Rights Act, and no unit of study or course of instruction or any contractors providing professional development will promote any idea that violates the Civil Rights Act. Expect that the child's teachers and education will present facts without bias or personal prejudice. Expect that the child's teacher shall work to eliminate coercion and that forces teachers to support actions and ideologies that violate individual professional integrity, and assert any other inalienable or constitutional right that is reserved to the parent and the child pursuant to state or federal law. Subsection D requires the Board of Education of each school district to adopt policies in consultation with parents, teachers, and school administrators that guarantee parents' rights to be involved in their child's education. Those policies would be required to include procedures for a parent to be informed of and inspect materials or activities provided in school, inspect and review any educational or health records of the school that pertain to the child, object to any learning material or activity if that harms the child or impairs the parent's firmly held beliefs, values, or principles, and withdraw the child from any such activity, challenge material or educational benefit of any book or other publication in the school library, which may result in removing that book or publication from the school. And then Senate Bill 496 would take effect upon publication in the statute book, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Tamara, do we have listed in any other legislation Civil Rights Acts of 1964?
I would have to do a search of the statutes for you, but I can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was looking at the bill, line 30, the right to make healthcare and medical decisions for such child, including the right to make decisions regarding vaccinations and immunizations. Can you tell me how that currently is different or similar to what is currently required for vaccinations? Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So KSA 726262 does require certain vaccinations from the Secretary of Health and Environment. There are 2 exceptions to those requirements for the child to attend school. One of them is a medical exception and the other is a religious exemption. This bill does not change or alter that statute in any way.
Thank you so much. Oh, there we go. Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And should any of these, should a parent's rights be violated, what would be the penalty for any violations?
This bill does not provide any particular cause of action, but a normal injunction would be a normal cause of action for a violation of law, but this does not provide any particular penalty.
Follow up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would a parent be able to withdraw that student from the school and transfer the aid that has been paid to that school to another school or anything like that? Or is that just determined case by case then?
So a parent can always withdraw their child from a school at any time for any reason, and the state aid does not follow the child. If they transfer in the middle of the school year, it would change based on when they're enrolled in the following school and then how the count works for enrollment.
Okay. Senator Sykes.
And thank you, Tamara. So in this, it's saying if they feel a child is compelled to believe or affirm or, if they feel like facts are maybe, I think, discretion or something, is there something in this that kind of defines what compelling or teaching, is any of that defined?
This bill contains no definitions, so no, none of those terms are defined in this bill.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We call up our first proponent, Brittany Jones, Director of Policy and Engagement, Kansas Family Voice. Brittany, welcome. We're keeping track of 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me today. Chairwoman Baumgartner and members of the Senate Education Committee, my name is Brittany Jones. I'm an attorney, and I'm the Director of Policy Engagement for Kansas Family Voice, formerly Family Policy Alliance of Kansas. At Kansas Family Voice, we believe that children are given to parents and to families and not the state. The government, schools, and even the church do not own children, though they play a role in their development. So we ask that you support SB 496 because it reminds parents and it institutes in our statutes that parents do have the fundamental duty and the fundamental right to raise their children. And these are very important protections, but these are also protections that have already been established in federal case law. As you can read through my testimony, I reference many different cases that talk about, that is not only established, but also talk about the boundary and the scope of these rights that have been established by the Supreme Court. There is also federal statutory protections that outline how a parent can interact and should interact in the school system. But we believe that this Parental Bill of Rights, this SB 496, goes a step further and arms parents with some specific interactions and specific ways they should expect to interact in the school system. We believe that children function best and learn best when their parents are involved in their education, and SB 496 does just that and helps parents throughout the state of Kansas better interact with their children in the educational setting. And now, of course, we believe that there are other ways that parents should engage, but that's a parent's job to do that. And so this outlines what a parent's roles and responsibilities and how the state of Kansas will respect those rights and those roles. So I ask that when you review SB 496 that you pass it out favorably, and I stand open for questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Elizabeth Patton, State Director, Americans for Prosperity in Kansas. Welcome to our committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to be before committee today. My name is Elizabeth Patton, and I am the State Director of Americans for Prosperity Kansas. I am also here as a mother of 4 school-age children, and on behalf of the thousands of activists across our state and our organization, and we do urge you to support Senate Bill 496, which in our view would provide a call for increased transparency and accountability in our state. The focus of my message today is that, honestly, there should be, in our view, unanimous support for curriculum and professional development transparency for institutions using taxpayer funding. In our view, this bill merely sets up a simple and basic framework for recognizing the rights of parents to play a key role in their child's education, which previous conferee agreed is truly important to success. This bill is honestly self-explanatory, if not self-evident, and we find it simple and straightforward. It is difficult to articulate why these materials and things laid out in this bill should not be inherent for the parents in this state, and we feel like it is a basic and accepted requirement for government accountability and transparency, specifically when it comes to children. We feel like the government ought to be extra diligent in that realm, with knowledge of what is being taught, and more importantly, what constituents and Kansans and parents themselves have as far as making informed decisions about not only their child's education, but what is going on with their taxpayer dollars. So this, in our view, is just one piece of a greater puzzle that we hope that the broader body considers regarding curriculum transparency and parental involvement. We see those as key ingredients in the current Every Student Succeeds Act. Schools must provide parents with curriculum information and explanations of curriculum and forms of assessments used to measure student progress. So I believe that we can all get to a place of agreement that robust parental engagement should never be anything more than common sense and reasonable. So with that, I'd be happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Okay. Committee, we are going to go ahead and move forward. Thank you very much for your testimony. We do have a piece of proponent written-only testimony from Mike O'Neill, Kansas Policy Institute. Now, we did have Mary Sinclair, PTA president, that signed up for neutral virtual, but she is not going to participate in a virtual. Oh, you're here.
Madam Chair, I'm here.
Okay. I was given a message that you were not wanting to speak in person. Are you wanting to?
No. Yeah. Oh, yes, please.
Okay. So 2.5 minutes. Let's get the clock set and you may begin. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm going to read from my consolidated notes so I can keep within your time limit. So I'm just going to try to highlight testimony that was provided. So I think it's important for us to begin. I am speaking on behalf of the Kansas PTA president. The PTA is the oldest and largest volunteer parent advocacy organization in the country. Our work is done by committee. I think that's important to note. We operate from a member-approved legislative platform, and this testimony that you hear today has been revised and reviewed by a committee of PTA leadership that bring a collective perspective to the table. Kansas PTA's neutral position on the bill reflects our shared goal to promote homeschool collaboration and communication. This is central to our mission. And so we embrace that, that intent to help support districts reaching out to families. Our significant reservations are based on the concern that this bill as written would actually interfere with that ongoing mission. So the places where we see potential for growth, Kansas PTA supports current practice of districts to provide parents access to student assignments, grades, instructional goals, materials, all those kinds of records. But it actually doesn't appear that parents' access to their kids' instruction is even a problem. Just this session, all the invited conferees to a January 24, 20 committee hearing on kind of a similar on this topic testified. I'm sorry, this was in the House, Madam Chair, not in the Senate, but it was a relevant testimony. And they provided, they were talking about how they all have access to their children's curriculum. I quote one of the conferees who was probably in support of this bill, says, I believe Blue Valley does an excellent job with curriculum testimony, or excuse me, I believe Blue Valley does an excellent job with curriculum transparency. I can go on to the website and see what the curriculum is. They list the novels. If a parent has an objection to a novel that can be brought up to school, I feel informed. So I don't know if this is really so much an issue about transparency. Parents have access. Again, within the mission to strengthen homeschool communication, PTA sees value in local boards, maybe making general information about professional development. Now I'm kind of hitting rights 7, 8, and 9. Before I was talking about rights 3 and 4.
That's our time for time.
Oh,
Can you
well,
wrap up quickly?
So our two concerns, this bill would deplete and take teachers' time away from learning, recovery, and instruction. And two, the Bill of Rights are so vaguely written, and the potential for financial penalty and related bills together is a disaster waiting to happen, and would just take resources and energy away from our shared collective goal of helping students learn. So we ask that you vote no unless some changes can be made to the bill. And thank you for giving me a few more seconds. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you very much for participating. We do have neutral written only testimony from Mark Tallman with the Kansas Association of School Boards. Now we're going to move on to opponents. And I have first up Lauren Tice Miller, Director of Government Relations and Elections, KNEA.
Is this on? There we go. All right. Senator Baumgartner, members of the committee, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. And I understand we have limited time. I did submit full testimony in a written form, so I would encourage you to please take a few moments to read that as well. I am Lauren Tice Miller, Director of Government Relations and Elections for Kansas NEA, and I stand before you today in opposition to Senate Bill 496. Kansas NEA believes partnerships with parents, families, communities, and other stakeholders are essential to quality public education and student success, but we believe it should be just that, a partnership. Partnerships are most effective when they come with mutual respect and a shared goal, which in this case is preparing every student for success in an ever-changing and diverse global economy. Our educators understand that parent involvement is critical to success for every student, and they have fully embraced it. We have a couple of educators with us here today who will speak more to that. While this bill is referred to as the Parents' Bill of Rights, we don't believe it is actually affording parents anything more than a duplication of what is already in place right now. We believe that if this bill is coupled with one of the bills being heard tomorrow by this committee, it will erode relationships between parents and teachers, but I'll save that more for tomorrow's hearing. Again, this is about valuing partnership. We believe that the expertise and judgment of education professionals are just as critical to student success as parent involvement, but it must remain a dynamic partnership that's not tainted by the interference of politicians. Lastly, we believe that voters in each school district determine the direction of their neighborhood schools every time they participate in nonpartisan school board elections. Therefore, there is nothing in this bill that could not be established at the direction of those locally elected school boards as priorities and policies. And with that, I would stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Mitch Rucker, Early Learning Policy Advisor for Kansas Action for Children. Mitch, thank you for being with us today.
Good afternoon. Oh, this one stays on.
Oh, we didn't turn it off, so there we go.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to testify today. I am Mitch Rucker, the Early Learning Policy Advisor at Kansas Action for Children. Also submitted written testimony, so just hitting some key highlights here. One of the issues that I saw in reading through the bill is the impact that this will potentially have on kids in our rural schools, specifically. Already we know that there are differences, might even go so far as to say disparities between the education that is offered to students in our more affluent and suburban, more densely populated areas than in our rural schools. As a product of a 1A school in western Kansas, I can tell you that, that those disparities exist. I think that this bill creates the opportunity to further exacerbate those by having the education that is offered to a student be determined not only by the resources that school district can bring to bear, but also by the cultural makeup or the ideological makeup of the members of a school board, opposing or certain aspects of a curriculum. And that will ultimately deny kids who would like to have access to that material the ability to learn it. And that will set them behind as they move out of that district and enter kind of the real world where they're going to be meeting folks who had other opportunities. So with that, I would also close and stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you very much, Mitch. Okay, we have 2 committee members that are having to leave for their committee, but Senator Sykes does have a quick question before she leaves. So go right ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for adjusting to my schedule. I think this is a question for Elizabeth and maybe Brittany. I know Elizabeth Patton, she said she had school-age children, and so I absolutely agree parents need to be engaged. As former PTA president, and it was like pulling teeth trying to get parents to attend PTA meetings, all those events. And I guess my question, as a parent, do you attend back to school night? And because I agree with Mitch, you know, we do have disparities across our state, but I have always been able to get, you know, the broad, this is a curriculum, this is what we're doing, and then those parent-teacher nights engaged, and I know what book they're going to read next week, and I hear what my kid did. So have you experienced the lack of that in your situation?
It varies. So in my experience, and then that of our activists and our volunteers and the folks that we have worked with on this issue, the variance is wide and it's inconsistent. It's even inconsistent among, you know, honestly, my kids' teachers, frankly. And on some level, that is naturally going to happen. But our point in all of this is that there could be room for improvement, and not every parent is as aware as others of the tools that they have in their toolbox. And we do think that there is quite a bit of room for those to be increased and perhaps strengthened so that we can encourage more parents to have a more active role in their child's education and make it easier for them to do so. It's not, it's inconsistent as is my experience.
Thank you for that. And I agree, we do need more participation. I mean, I'm probably crazy. I walk 60 miles for public schools. But my question is this the way to get that involvement, or is there other ways that we could work together to get that engagement? Because we want that partnership. And I'm one who talks to my kid every night about what he did in school, and
yeah, same. You know, it's tough. It's tough being a working mom, and I'm grateful I have a partner who is right in it with me. That's not everyone's situation, and not everyone is going to the same schools or has the same teachers that we all have, which is a privilege and wonderful. And in most cases, not everyone has that same experience statewide, is my point. But also to that, I think this is a piece of the greater puzzle. Did I get up here and say that this is the silver bullet to fixing all of the issues? No, but I do think that this is an important piece of exactly that conversation we do need to have to strengthen those tools and set up Kansas. I mean, the key to success, I think we can all agree, is education, and it's making sure that our kids have the best access to that and that it suits them, because one size fits all does not fit every kid, and we know that. You know, I used to travel around and talk to some school districts, and that was the big thing: is mandates are one size fits all, or you know, we're getting these things here and there. And our goal here with this as the start is not only including parents, but seeing how we can fit this into the broader policy puzzle where we can make broad improvements in our state and make sure that we have a place where kids can succeed and thrive in a way that families can be involved and make sure that they are making the most informed decisions they can to suit their kids and their individual needs.
Thank you very much.
Follow up.
Real quick.
Okay, sorry, one more follow-up, yeah.
She's more than exceeded her 2.5 minutes.
I'm so sorry. So my question, if we go through this, and I know there's other bills on the House side with money going to or choice of schools, would you agree for this across the board for all schools in Kansas, public and private?
I'm sorry, can you clarify your question one more time?
I say there's other bills that we've seen kind of expanding choice and things like that for parents to have the choice. If moving forward on that, and if this move, would you be applicable for this being across the board for all schools, public and private in Kansas?
I think that there's two things, There's a lot of different things you're asking here, in my view, and maybe I'm not answering this in the right way, but there is, public schools have taxpayer funding, and that is on some level with some of the bills not applicable to some private schools that do not receive taxpayer funding. At the same time, there are bills that do cross-pollinate and are applicable to both of those, in the sense that we believe and we would like to see policies that do allow every child in Kansas to thrive, and regardless of their zip code or their circumstance. And so I think that very much just depends on the particular piece of legislation and what its goal is. But in the sense that we want every child in Kansas to thrive and have those same opportunities that all the other kids have, I do think that that is the goal of the policy.
Thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on. We're going to get back to opponent testimony. So we have, Michael Papa, Mainstream Coalition. Michael, thanks for being here today.
Madam Chair, committee members, thank you very much for allowing me to appear before you today. Mainstream Coalition was founded in 1993 by a bipartisan multi-faith coalition of community leaders on the sacrosanct belief of religious freedom and equal representation in our government. We agree with the concept that a parent should have rights and access to information regarding their child's education. We agree that a child's education is a crucial element of their development, quality of life, and long-term success. And we do agree that public schools should not have a role in the religious training of the child. Schools should not be teaching any religion, nor should they be held to any one set of religious values in the classroom. It's nice to actually have something that we can agree on, right? Do a little dance interlude.
You got a music track for that.
But unfortunately, that's where our agreement ends with this bill. SB 496 we see as a corruption of these principles, staged by outside interests and supported by rumor mills and fear-mongering. It's searching for a problem that just frankly does not exist. Parents already have access to information regarding their child's education and to the teachers, staff, and administrators who support them. It's the external actors trying to influence public education that do lack access. This bill is not interested in upholding the hard-won victories of the Civil Rights Act. Instead, it would distort our history and revert our values back to an era when we valued one perspective over others. Protections already exist in our state's Bill of Rights to guard against the encroachment of religious doctrine in the public space. Parents should not have the right to threaten teachers, ban materials, ban books that present a differing viewpoint, or undermine the hard work and dedication of professionals who have dedicated their life to teaching. This legislature has repeatedly chosen to listen to a narrow sampling of parents who are angry with their schools and fearful of what they believe to be a threat to how they want the world to operate. So we are asking you now to please listen to parents, please listen to teachers who love our schools, who want to see a more diverse and welcoming approach to education, and who are hopeful for the future that our students will create. Instead of burning books where this bill could lead, we urge you to please burn this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Next up, I have Sarah Ursick, Good, Board Member, Immunize Kansas Coalition. Thank you for being with us today.
Good afternoon. So this might be quick, thanks for the opportunity to be here, but I'm here representing the Immunize Kansas Coalition, and leading up to this hearing, we weren't sure about the impact that this piece of legislation, specifically Section C6, would have on existing wellness requirements. And so with Senator O'Shea's clarifying question and the reviser's answer to that this wouldn't impact current regulations, then IKC would withdraw our opposition to this piece of legislation. So I will concede my time back.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that question, Senator O'Shea. Next up, I have Judith Deedy, Executive Director, Game On for Kansas Schools. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Can I ask a clarifying question around my earlier question that has to deal?
Yes, when we get, can we finish with the rest of the testimony and then we'll get to that? Okay. We are. Yep.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to voice our opposition to 496. At the outset, we state that our members are largely parents. We support parents' rights in the realm of public education. However, we question the necessity of this bill. We don't take issue with multiple sections of the bill other than noting that they are already law or practice and don't need to be legislated. We object to creating an appearance that our schools are not already doing these things. We object to Section 1C5 in that we support our local boards placing reasonable restrictions on the conduct of participants in school board meetings. We've seen unacceptable behavior in school board meetings used to share inaccurate information and support appropriate limits on both. We also thought that 1C6 was going to change immunization law. So again, if that's not the case, that's good to hear. But then also, we're not sure why that section is in this bill. We note that our school districts are already required to comply with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. But we believe these sections that refer to that legislation are included as an accusation that such violations are occurring in our schools. We find it particularly troubling that the Civil Rights Act is being used to attack efforts to make sure every child has a sense of belonging at their school. We are aware of the optics of this bill. We believe that it may be used to unfairly accuse opponents of opposing parent rights and imply our schools are not respecting parent rights. To be clear, most of us are parents and we support parent rights, but we take issue with multiple sections of this bill. We urge you to vote no. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, I have Samantha, is it Neal or Niall? Neal, awesome. A teacher, thank you for being here.
Chairperson Baumgardner and the members of the Kansas Senate Education Committee, I am speaking today, and you have my written testimony about my opposition to Senate Bill 496. Let me first start by saying that I am a public school teacher of 19 years in Bueller USD 313. I currently teach high school ELA journalism, photojournalism, and yearbook. I am my district's PDC chairperson, and I am the 2018 Kansas Teacher of the Year. Most importantly, I am the mother of 3 boys, one who is attending Fort Hays State University majoring in secondary education because he believes in the value of public education, and 2 who are public school students. At a time when we face critical shortage of highly qualified educators, I can't think of a bill that would make more things difficult than this bill. As written, this bill steals learning time from our students, requiring their educators to duplicate work. It stifles innovation, creativity, and adaptability. As it's written, it takes away our ability to individualize education for our students. I'm in opposition to this bill because of the harm it will cause our students and educators. Our students need highly qualified educators in their classrooms who can be trusted to make the best educational decisions for their students. Kansas leads this country with one of the most robust and collaborative education departments, and I have seen that firsthand as I have worked with teachers from across this country. But this bill will stifle that innovation, creativity, and replace some of those important learning skills with a fear of punishment. Local school boards already have policies in place to vet curriculum materials. I have gone through that with my own district, and I can tell you that it is intense, it is rigorous, and we all want what is best for our students. We have department and grade level standards and collaboration amongst colleagues in our buildings and across the state to ensure that the learning at high level takes place. We want nothing more than our students to be safe, whether that is physically, emotionally, with their health. And we are very careful about the material that we present. Parents have never had more access to what is being taught in classrooms than they do today. They are able to connect with teachers through telephone calls and emails. I am able to use apps like Seesaw, Remind 101. Our school sends out announcements and reminders. We have our own apps now to share some of the things that are happening within our buildings. And as I would tell my principal when he asked what hour he should come evaluate me, I said, you can come anytime. I have nothing to hide. I do feel that this bill will drive away good educators. And because of that, we have nothing to hide. I would ask you to oppose this legislation.
Thank you so much. Next up, I have Joel Addis, also a teacher. Joel, thank you for being with us today.
Madam Chairperson, members of the committee, thank you for giving me a chance to speak today. I did submit written testimony, so I'll be brief in my comments. I am a 20-year veteran educator of Derby Public Schools. I've spent most of my career there as a special education teacher at the elementary level, working with students kindergarten through 5th grade with a variety of exceptionalities. I'm also father of 3 school-age children, all who attend Derby Public Schools, 2 of whom have exceptionalities and receive special education services. I'd like to start by talking about transparency. Like many districts across our state, Derby Public Schools provides transparency to parents in a variety of ways. Our school website has a description of all of our curricula. Parents have the opportunity to view their child's academic tasks and the scope and sequence of their instruction for their grade level through standard-based report cards and online portals. These are reinforced through scheduled and unscheduled conferences. In addition to the consistent connection that teachers have with parents through email, phone calls, and in-person meetings. In addition to this, students with exceptionalities also have, at minimum, annual IEP meetings as well as quarterly progress reports. In my experience as an educator and a parent, the most impactful educational moments are the small, teachable moments when an educator can adapt their approach to the needs of the students in front of them. The bill, as it's written, with all of its requirements, would make this difficult, if not impossible. As written, this bill restricts teachers' abilities to adapt instructional approaches to students' needs and then individualize that instruction. It gives us a choice, or forces a choice upon us, to choose to duplicate our work or to spend time providing services to our students. The ability to differentiate approaches in the classroom improves student outcomes. This practice forms the core of an educator's ability to provide interventional services to students that are individualized to their needs. Students' needs change throughout the year. By not allowing professional educators the freedom to adapt to those changes, students are going to be harmed. Effective teaching is built upon relationships. Those relationships are built upon the moments where students see teachers working to meet them where they are at and meet their needs. The bill is harmful to students. I thank you, and I would stand for questions at appropriate time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Last up, we have Rabbi Moti Reber. Thank you for being with us. He's the Executive Director of Kansas Interfaith Action.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rabbi Moti Reber, Kansas Interfaith Action. We're a statewide multi-faith issue advocacy organization that works on a variety of important justice issues. We're partners with many of the main denominations in Kansas. I have some personal experience on this. I put 3 kids, my wife and I put 3 kids through Shawnee Mission School District. The last one graduated in 2021. As a religious minority, I knew that it was always going to be incumbent upon me to manage their moral education, that they would be exposed to things in school that we wouldn't necessarily be in keeping with our family's values. They were in religious education at Congregation Beth Shalom through the age of 15. We were always in communication with the school, with the teachers, with the vice principal. There were things that came up that were problematic, and I never had a problem finding alternatives or taking kids out. So from my perspective, as a religious minority and a religious person, I believe that those elements of the bill are already there. The reason that KIFA is involved in this is because of the conversation around critical theory that's been happening in the legislature and across the country over the last little while. We think that it toxifies conversations about race and also LGBT issues by making teachers afraid to teach controversial subjects which should not be controversial. We think the reason that I put my kids in public school as opposed to the day school was because I wanted them to be exposed to diversity, and I think that's important also. I'll echo Mrs. Deede's conversation about Section 1C, 7, and 8 about the Civil Rights Act, even though it's sort of been claimed over and over again that there's violations of the Civil Rights Act going on. There is nothing that's been discussed in any committee, in the interim committee, in this committee, that has been held in the language of the bill to violate the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Not deep equity, nothing. It's not, it's an assertion. We're legislating an assertion that is a false assertion, I think, factually. I want to say that, to conclude, I think that the whole conversation about critical pedagogy uses racially charged language to undermine support for public schools. I think that it plays to the prejudices and insecurities of white parents, and I have no doubt, you know, although I don't doubt that the committee will pass this law, I hope that it will not become law, this bill. I hope it will not become law, and I will work both on the floor and with the governor's office to make sure that this doesn't become law. Thank you very much.
There we go. Committee, we are now opening it up for questions. So first, we have a clarifying question with Senator O'Shea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question's for the reviser. So I understand that this wouldn't affect what's currently the current legal options for immunizations and students, but would this add a third avenue to that?
So this bill on page 1 in line 30, that paragraph 6, does provide the right to make healthcare and medical decisions for such child, including the right to make decisions regarding vaccinations and immunizations. So parents generally already have that right, but with regard to schools, then comes in 726262, which says that if you're going to attend school, you have to have certain vaccinations, but there are 2 exceptions. So those 2 exceptions still exist. My understanding is this doesn't necessarily provide a third exception, but you can still utilize the exceptions provided in 726262.
Thank you.
Committee, what other questions? Yes. Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just real quick, follow up on that. When was that law put into place?
726262 was first enacted in 1961, but has been amended several times, most recently in 1994.
Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I thank everyone for the discussion today. As I read this bill, I hear on one hand, we're already doing it. There's not the need for this bill at all. And then on the other hand, I hear that this bill stifles innovation and creativity, harms students, doesn't let teachers do the job, punishes teachers, allows parents to threaten school board members. And frankly, I can't find that in this bill. So I would just like to ask if anyone can show me in this bill where this bill allows parents to be threatening, where it takes away time from teachers. I do not see that in this bill, and I would appreciate that. And then I do have so you can be thinking about that, I do have a specific question for Mr. Papa from Mainstream Coalition. Thank you. Just to clarify, in your testimony, you referenced that this bill is not interested in upholding the hard-won victories of the Civil Rights Act. Instead, it would distort our history and revert our values back to an era when we valued one perspective over all others. And then you specify that of the white, straight, Christian, higher income family. Sir, can you tell me where that is in this bill?
Sure, those words are not exactly in that bill, and what you're referring to is in the written testimony, but just for clarification, it was not in my verbal. So those exact words are not in the bill, but there are implications throughout, and especially in the special session, we saw a lot of the special session. What was that, back in November? Excuse me. We saw a lot of those concerns and fears coming out if they were not explicitly mentioned from proponents of the measures that were being discussed and being heard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And as a follow-up, as it relates to this bill that's before us today, how does those statements not create the fear-mongering that you are testifying against, sir? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator, thank you for the question. I believe that this bill is directly related and came out of those discussions. So it does relate to this bill, not necessarily fear mongering, but fear that something like that would happen.
Madam Chair, I would still like to know from the other proponents who are saying that this stifles innovation and creativity and harms teachers. I would like to know where that is in this specific bill, please. Thank you.
Sure. So I can speak to that. I know in my written testimony, we speak to that a little bit. Part of that is because of the conversation we are about to go into on the House side, where it does establish that materials have to be published on websites and all of that. And we will be having that discussion tomorrow with the Senate hearings on 363 and 393, which is what I mentioned in my testimony a little bit ago, is that if this bill were to be coupled with those, it would be harmful. What we are speaking to is the fact that there are these things already in place. And so this would require a duplication of efforts by our educators, and it would take away their time from being able to respond to parent emails, respond to parent phone calls, because they would be more focused on the data entry of the elements that we see in the other bills. We were not speaking specifically to this bill. In my testimony, I specifically said that if it's coupled with other bills, there will be a duplication.
So my question to you is, what specifically in this bill, not projecting, not testifying on future or other bills, what specifically in this bill do you not agree with? Do you not agree that the parents are the primary party responsible for the upbringing and development of their children, and that they should partner with schools? What is it in this bill that you specifically object to?
Well, Senator, you make a great point. That was exactly our point, is that there should be a partnership between the teachers and parents, and those partnerships exist right now. And so with this, it is redundant. The parents already have the rights to ask to review materials. They already have the right to be involved in the curriculum process. They already have the right to go to their school boards and ask questions as well. And on top of that, they have the right to vote for their locally elected school board members that ultimately determine the direction of that district. And so we believe that this bill is unnecessary.
I appreciate that, Madam Chair, but with everything that's going on, and we heard from our minority leader that it's like pulling teeth. And as a former principal and school board member, we know that we don't have the level of parental involvement in schools that we need. And quite frankly, I find it somewhat concerning that educators would not say yes. We affirm this very much because we always talk about how important parental participation and involvement in their child's education is, which is exactly what this bill does. It's exactly what it does. It solidifies it, it strengthens it, it puts it in one place that leaves no room for misinterpretation. So I'm quite frankly kind of confused with the opposition to this, Madam Chair. And with that, I know we are under a time crunch, so I will yield back. Thank you.
Senator O'Shea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is for Michael with the Mainstream Coalition. Senator Erickson asked you about how this bill would distort our history and revert our values back to an era where we valued one perspective over all others, that of white, straight, Christian, and higher income family. I was really disappointed with your very vague answer, and I would like for you to share some very specific examples of why you think this bill would do that.
Well, as I mentioned, thank you very much again. As I mentioned, I'm not able to share specific examples that are written in this bill, but it is my belief and the belief of many that as elected officials, when you're crafting legislation, you need to not only look narrowly at the written word on the paper, but you also have to think about the unintended consequences or the intended consequences that come with that bill. So we are just asking you to think about unintended consequences that can happen from enacting this bill and the bill that's being heard in House K-12 as well.
Okay, I am going to share with those that are here today, those that are viewing. In general, we focus on the bills that are in front of us in the Senate. So your continued reference, and I think we've heard it from some others, of what's happening on the House, We really don't have that purview yet. And if they don't get it out of committee and pass it on the floor, it will never come over to us. So I hate to say that it's not really our concern right now, but we're here just on this Senate bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator O'Shea, did you have a follow-up?
No, I still don't think you've answered my question. It's very vague, and I'm disappointed. And again, I don't want to waste more of our time. Thank you.
Okay. Senator Petty.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I guess I somewhat have to disagree with my chair in that I think that we are all interested in the bills that are in this building this year.
I'm not saying that we're not interested. I'm saying our focus today is not on something that's happening that may never come over to us.
And I would agree, our focus is on the bill today. I'd like to ask Elizabeth Patton a question. So I know, Elizabeth, that you've mentioned that you're a mother of 4. Do they go to public school?
I don't know why that's a question that's
Well,
relevant.
it is a
to the
question.
committee.
You can answer it. Do they go to public school?
Some of them do go to public school, some of them do not.
Okay, thank you. You're here testifying, so and you say you're a parent, so
Yeah,
it's a,
sure.
And do they go to school in Kansas?
They do.
You know, Elizabeth, as I look through this bill, I see that the language in this bill comes directly from the Heritage Foundation in Washington, D.C. And that's a Washington, D.C.-based organization. And the reason I'm asking this is because we're talking about legislation that we want here in Kansas. So is Washington, D.C. then driving educational policy in Kansas instead of Kansas driving educational policy?
No, I don't believe it is, and I work for Americans for Prosperity, which is not the Heritage Foundation. I'm not an author on this bill, but we do have some similar alignment with some like-minded organizations around the country, and I mean, I know Washington, D.C. is not driving policy in Kansas. I don't know what exactly you're trying to get at there.
Well, the language in this bill is directly from the Heritage Foundation.
Okay. I work for Americans for Prosperity, so.
Okay, but you're supportive of this bill. You spoke in favor of this bill, of those items that are directly in here that are not, not coming from Kansas values. They're coming from a Washington-based organization. And you mentioned about, parents, being a parent and wanting parents involved. So I guess I'm a former educator. I'm very concerned about how this bill, and I've heard other comments about wanting parents to be involved, and yet our schools are doing all sorts of things to offer. You said, or it's been mentioned, maybe you did not specifically say about parent-teacher conferences, back to school night, and newsletters going home on a weekly basis. So are those tools that are being used by our schools right now to have parents involved, to provide them information?
I'm not sure what you're exactly getting at.
I'm asking you about the things I just said. Are those tools right now that are being offered to provide information for parents to get them involved?
I think it's inconsistent, which is what I said in response to Senator Sykes earlier, and that there's an inconsistency in understanding not only from parents around the state and what some of their capabilities and rights and tools are within the state, but I think there's also inconsistency between schools and honestly even teachers within those school districts. And I think that was a similar answer to what I gave to Senator Sykes. So there's inconsistency.
So human nature that creates inconsistency in how people teach, parent their children. You're saying those inconsistencies will be changed by this?
We are hopeful that there is gross improvement and across the state. When you're talking about a institution that is taxpayer funded, like public schools, for example, there is a level of accountability and transparency and taxpayer involvement that I think is necessary when you're looking at this. I mean, public schools are a taxpayer funded institution. That is government. And I think that you should be held to a standard of consistent accountability and transparency when it comes to what's going on in a taxpayer-funded institution, just like that should happen here in the State House and in any other government or local government institution around our state.
In our public schools, who runs our public schools? I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Every once in a while.
Every once in a while is your way.
Could
Okay.
you, yeah, let's follow
Last
the
question.
process.
And so in our public schools across the state of Kansas, who's the overseeing body in our public schools?
I mean, I guess that depends on how you look at it.
No, who's our overseeing body, elected bodies in our public schools?
Please let her just finish the answer.
Sure. So,
I'd like her to answer my question.
I understand, but she's
so you
put a
have,
conjunction in there, so wanted to finish the.
sure. Based on how you look at it, you have the Kansas State Legislature, you have the Kansas State Board of Education, you have local school districts, and you have, I don't know, there's a lot of different competing authorities within this that I think provide some of the inconsistency here and where we're missing pieces of the accountability.
Yeah, there is elected school boards. That's who at each school district, they're elected school boards. I'm sorry you weren't able to say this. Thank you. You don't need to say any more. I do have another question though, but not for her.
So we'll allow that last question. Just so everybody knows, we've had a whole lot of latitude here, an extra 35 minutes, actually an extra 40 minutes beyond what, as a committee, we should have. So let's have our last question, and then we do need to stop.
So this is for Mary Sinclair, if Mary's still online.
Here.
Mary, thank you for staying on, and thank you for being here, and thank you for being part of the state PTA. I think you, in your testimony, referred to teachers, and so what impact, I think you might have mentioned this, what impact do you see that this bill would have on our educational workforce and our teachers' ability to spend time and actually teach?
Well, the concern is in part is that there's a level of documentation that is kind of laid out in the bill so that the way that I read it and our PTA committee members read it is that every instructional piece of material and lesson plan and whatnot all be documented and posted online. And there's a piece in there that if a parent objects to something happening in the classroom, that they would be able to remove their child from the classroom. And that would presume then that that instructional material be posted ahead of time to allow for that kind of interaction. And at a time when we're asking our teachers to not only focus on learning recovery, but to do all of that individualized lesson planning, you know, once it's posted, is there opportunity to change that? If there is a concern that I as a parent have with my child, and communicate that. So there is such, the language is so broad, it's really unclear to know to what extent are teachers being held accountable. And really, if I have a parent have access to all that information, I'm not going to go look on the website. I mean, just looking at the way the website, I think the way the information is supposed to be listed, I'm not even sure as a parent I would be able to go through all of that documentation and know which of that material is relevant to my child. I'm just going to go through my portal and my relationship with my teacher and ask. All that documentation kind of disconnects what's relevant for me and my child from this big extensive list of information. And so part of the problem is that there's really high stakes consequences for something that is kind of very open-ended and very time consuming. I'd rather have our teachers we'd rather have our teachers focusing on instruction. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will simply say that I think that there are some folks that are confusing this bill with other bills. In reading it, and as well as what was presented by our revisers as far as what is in this bill, there are not any consequences. There are no, I think we did hear high stakes consequences. There's no punishment. There are no direct consequences. And I think that had even been asked repeatedly, what happens if this were to become law, what would happen if it weren't followed? And we refer to that as clawback or teeth. There is no clawback in this bill. There are no teeth in this bill. Am I correct in that from our reviser?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, you are correct. There are no penalty provisions in this bill.
Okay, thank you very much. I do want to thank everyone for your participation. I appreciate the indulgence where we had to kind of jump around a little bit. We did go well over the time allotted for this. There will not be that discretion, weather permitting, the hearing tomorrow, there will not be that discretion tomorrow to go over time at all. But everyone that has signed up to participate will be allowed to participate, but the timing is going to be quite tight because there are bills, it's my understanding, to be above the line, and this committee will need to end promptly in time tomorrow. So again, thank you for your participation, and we are adjourned.